So hello, John. Lovely to see you.
Lovely to see
Believe it or
you.
not, 2 years almost since we first met and talked about telling John's story as a Twitter prequel.
Right.
So I'd just love to know, how did you feel when we first talked and suggested that idea that we'd like to tell John's stories as a prequel and trying to understand what he did 6 months before?
Right. It seemed really smart, especially given the fact that Twitter was a character in the film. In the respect that John's character in the film is like desperately in love with Twitter. You know, he's like Twitter's kind of like the snake in John's Garden of Eden. You know, like as his followers grow, you know, he becomes more and more malevolent, even though he doesn't realise he's becoming malevolent. So Twitter was quite a big part of the film, like the way that we create these fake identities for ourselves on social media, and how, you know, we're too in love with it, and in fact, you know, we ruin people. You know, it's a bit like social media is kind of a bit like the sort of Wicker Man. You know, we sort of throw everything into it. You know, we'll destroy people who made a joke that came out badly, and we'll destroy our friends. You know, we'll do anything for this. You know, for retweets and exciting looking followers. It's a bit like the Milgram experiment in fact that, you know, we will press the button and electrocute somebody for the scientist in the lab coat, but you know, in Twitter, the scientist in the lab coat is, you know, some verified celebrity that we just want to impress. So, you know, I wanted to bring all that into the screenplay anyway. And so when you came along and said you wanted to you know, create this campaign where you know, John's backstory, his pre-movie life, was playing out on Twitter, I thought it was perfect. It was brilliant.
So obviously you've collaborated with lots of people before, and you collaborated on the story with Peter. How did you feel about collaborating in a different kind of way? As in, how did you feel about writing the story of John beforehand with people that you'd never met before?
Right. Well, I thought it was great. I thought we had to sort of set down a bunch of ground rules, because at the very, very beginning we were talking about, well, would the band, with the solemn proverbs, have... It's funny that, you know, there's a way of pronouncing the band's name, because when we came up with the band's name, it was literally just, oh, we should call them, you know, a name that's impossible to remember or pronounce, you know, something like that, just sort of, you know, typed random letters, and then suddenly you have to say they're the solemn proverbs. But it was just the way my fingers went on the keyboard that day.
So that was it. That's how you come up with the band's name.
Yeah, I said, yeah, we should call. They were going to be called. At first, they were going to be called the Ghosts, but it always seemed weird that they would have, or sort of wrong that they'd have a normal name. So I thought maybe we should give them a name that's like impossible to remember or pronounce, and so I literally just went, you know, something like, you know, and that's how they got the name. So they wouldn't have had any kind of Twitter presence. The only people in the film who would be on Twitter would have been, you know, was John. Clara and Frank and the others wouldn't be interested in Twitter. So we had to sort of set up those ground rules that this was like John's endeavour, not Frank's endeavour, not the band's endeavour. Then it was great. And then you came to New York, where I was living, and you know, and we started thinking about kind of, you know, Instagram. What would John be like on Instagram, and what would John be like on, you know, what were the other ones we thought about?
Well, we looked at
Spotify.
Yeah, Spotify. Yeah. In the end, John had a Spotify account, a This Is My Jam account.
Oh yeah. I still don't quite know what This Is My Jam is.
This Is My Jam is every single day he tweets. Right. He jams his favourite jam, which is the tune that he's listening to at the moment. So, and
then it automatically tweets my new jam is.
That's why
I've seen that. It's a shame that the tweets have to have the word jam in them. I've seen that. But yeah, so it was brilliant. So basically, you know, we knew what John's life was like before we met the band. You know, he was living in this god-awful town, and he was trying to aggrandise it. You know that from the movie. And so, you know, I remember one time we had an idea that that, you know, John would be taking, like all of John's Instagram pictures at the time would be in black and white, and it'd be sort of moody, and like, you know, Morrissey covers. The whole thing is about him creating a mythology for himself, but because he's not very imaginative, the mythology he's creating for himself is a bit crap. So actually it was like writing the movie. It was like writing a prequel to the movie, which was just playing out on Instagram and Twitter and so on. And you know, it was really exciting.
So the big challenge was, because before he has this incredible experience where he meets the band, he's got an incredibly dull life. And the challenge was, you know, as a writer writing his tweets every day, how do you make a dull life seem interesting enough for people to be interested? And you pointed me in the direction of The Man Who Fell.
Yes, Greg Steckelman. I said he's not on Twitter anymore. In fact, his very last tweet in 2012 said, "Twitter is no place for a human being." But he was great. He was like a kind of Nick Hornby type, you know, just taking the mundane and just giving it a slight twist. You know, kind of. Did you use him?
Well, we didn't use him, but I took inspiration from him. And the other place I took inspiration from was my favourite film, which is Billy Liar.
Right.
Because Billy Liar has this incredibly dull life, and the way he makes it interesting is by inventing these incredible scenarios that he pretends is involved with. So John would tweet, you know, Kim Kardashian, but he would be talking as though they were really good friends. And
yes, in fact, you were doing that. John, you know, John was tweeting like Lauren Laverne and stuff. Did any of them ever?
Yeah, of course.
Like retweet.
Lauren Laverne got back on a regular basis, and quite a few people favourited and retweeted.
And did they know that? At what point did they work out that this was a fictional character in an upcoming movie?
Well, Lauren knew because I told her beforehand. Because I was trolling Lauren a little bit, and I didn't want to be an unknown troll and cause her any, sadness. Yeah. But other people didn't, and it was really nice kind of seeing afterwards. And I still see them today. People discovering John and saying, "I just thought this was a weird kid that lived around where I live." Yeah.
That's brilliant. That's the other thing, is that it's there forever, right? So people watching the movie in a year's time, all they have to do is type in John's Twitter name, and suddenly they find this whole world, this rabbit hole that they can go to. I remember you saying that to me when you came to New York, you know, that we're creating a rabbit hole that people in 5 years' time can go down.
So John's not.
And it doesn't vanish. Let me ask. It doesn't, like, everything that John tweets. It's all there if you want to find it.
Everything's there.
Right.
6 months worth of tweets.
And Instagrams and
Spotify's and Jams and videos. So I was kind of fascinated by your process of writing. This is, you talked to me about how you write. Going from the very first spark of inspiration, you know, the story of you picking up the phone one day, right through to how we ended up with
Michael Fassbender.
Yeah. Can you just talk a little bit about your process?
Well, until Frank, I was only ever writing non-fiction, so that was comparatively easy. You know, you walk into a room, and whatever happens in the room is your canvas. And you know, there's a skill in working out what bits of what's happening in the room will work as in a narrative arc in non-fiction, but at least you're not having to sort of invent the source material. But with Frank, you know, that for the first time ever, it was completely different, and it took me a long time to work out how to do it. And you know, the main reason I worked out how to do it was because I had, you know, fantastic mentoring from Peter Strawn, who's, you know, one of the best screenwriters in the world, and we wrote it together. And I remember one time Peter, in real life, Chris Evie, Frank wanted to make the band more mainstream. And I remember one time Peter said to me, really early on in the process, he said, you know, it'd be better if it was John who was trying to make the band more mainstream, not Frank. And I sort of gave him this sort of, you know, bewildered look, and he said, John, we're allowed to make things up. And I felt like Alice, you know, going down a rabbit hole in a whole new world. And so you know, it was Peter who taught me how to do it. And then when Lenny came on board a few years later, you know, he really helped teach me how to do it as well. and then eventually fiction becomes more like journalism because these characters start to exist. You know, Clara starts to exist as a character, and so then, you know, you get to a stage where you sort of think, well, now it's like journalism. There's all this material, and now you start to whittle it down, just like you do in feature writing. And that moment when fiction and feature writing become kind of the same thing was when I started to feel comfortable.
So basically, the way I build my stories, because I work in the digital arena, shall we say, there are three areas that I always look at and think about. And the first one is attention, and what are the attention patterns of the audience who are going to be experiencing this.
Yeah.
What are the behaviours? So what will they do? So an example of a behaviour might be a retweet, or they might make a parody video, or
right.
you know. And the third thing is circulation, and circulation basically is kind of this new world that we live in. We used to live in a world of distribution where if I was to discover a film 20 years ago, I would have discovered it through Barry Norman, or I would have, you know, I would have heard about it on the radio. Now if I find out about a film, it's probably from on Twitter from either a friend who's seen it and is talking about it, or from someone who's done a mashup of the poster, or some of the videos. So it's kind of, circulation's a hybrid of top down, bottom up. So we sat down and we went through them, and then we started to build the beats of Jon's story.
Yeah.
How did you find that? I mean, was it difficult getting your head around the ABCs, the attention, behaviour, circulation?
Well, I mean, I'd never think of it in those, you know, in those terms. But the way you just described it now, I mean, certainly the first two is what you do as writers. You know, you don't want any sentence to outstay its welcome. You know, or in terms of a movie, you don't want any scene. You don't want to repeat beats. You know, you don't want. You know, I think the audience is outraged if like 45 minutes into a film they're basically getting the same information that they got in a scene 20 minutes earlier. You know, they're outraged, and I would be outraged if, you know, it's all happening subconsciously, but it's happening. You know, it's like Woody Allen said about relationships. You know, they're like a shark. You have to keep constantly moving forward or else you die, and that's the same as screenplays. You know, they have to constantly move forward or else, you know, you die. And then behaviour, I can't quite remember. But anyway, so yes. What was really exciting, I thought, was, you know, we were giving Jon this backstory, but then at some point, the real life events of the movie would come into Jon's story. So at some point after you'd been tweeting for like 6 months with probably like 40 followers, but then went up to like 100 followers and ended up with a couple of thousand followers, and you know, at one point, I mean, tell me if I'm wrong, but at one point Jon would tweet something like, "You would not believe what happened to me last night," and suddenly the narrative of the movie comes into the narrative of Jon's Twitter feed.
So every tweet Jon did in the film actually appears in Jon's, but there's just more, shall we say, flesh on the bone.
Right.
So there's you know, how he describes the first gig is really fascinating. The most popular favorited tweet and retweeted was, "They're not using any of my compositions, but I gave them my nest egg."
Yeah,
and
I gave my fucking nest egg.
Yeah. That's the one that kind of really took off. So when we were working with you, the one thing that I found really, really interesting was I asked you about what involvement you have once you've handed the script over, and you talked about it being a little bit like a relay race. Can you explain to me the concept of passing the baton?
Well, I sort of think like in a relay race, you know, if you've passed the baton on to somebody else, and then you decide that you want the baton back, so you start running frantically to try and get the baton back. You know, you've got to fall over. So yeah, you have to. I heard an interview with Nick Hornby the other night where he was talking. You know, the interviewer Jon Wilson was, you know, astonished that Nick, you know, would make himself subservient to the director, and Jon Wilson said, "Well, can't you say to the director, no, don't change that line?" And Nick Hornby told a story about Joe Esterhaus. That Joe Esterhaus, you know, would always say, you know, don't let the director touch a word of your script, you know, don't let them change a word. And Nick said, Joe Esterhazy hasn't made a film in 15 years. So I think that's the thing, is that you are, I mean, that's just the, you know, the film process is that you're the king, you know, when you're out in the screenplay, and it's all yours, and everybody has to, you know, leave you alone, and then you kind of bring people in, and it's collaborative, and then you go off again, and you're the king again, you know, and then when you deliver and it's accepted, you know, what just flashed into my head was the credit sequence for Porridge when the prison door just slams, and there you go, it's gone.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah. It was really interesting.
Yeah.
But in a strange kind of way, it was kind of a little bit unnerving, because once I'd started, because ultimately it's semi-autobiographical anyway.
Yeah, although it's semi-autobiographical, but it's not. I mean, there was never any preciousness, because we you know, I was so fictionalised and Frank was so fictionalised. It was actually kind of, for me, it was like a real blessed relief. I mean, with every bit of journalism comes, you know, immense ethical difficulties. You know, I spend my life worrying about the feelings of the people I'm writing about. You know, it wakes me up in the middle of the night. It's a constant source of concern. And with Frank, you know, even though the movie would never have happened if it wasn't for Chris Seavey and Frank Sidebottom, you know, it wasn't about him and it wasn't about me. So actually, ethically, it felt, you know, wonderful that you didn't have to worry about people's feelings.
Yeah, so maybe if I would have known that,
I
wouldn't have. So with me, from me picking up that baton and then running with it for 6 months, the challenge for me wasn't that I wasn't going to get it right, because by virtue of the fact that you were saying, I've passed the baton to you, it's how you see this character to be. But I was really worried about getting it terribly wrong.
Well, Jon is, you know, I do remember at one point, you know, a few years into writing the screenplay, I said to Peter, I said, look, how about this, Peter? I'll write Jon and Jon's character, and you write Frank's character. And Peter went, no, Frank's character is like much harder to write than Jon's character, because Frank's like, everything Frank says has to be like amazing and, you know, mysterious and like, you know, at the end, at its furthest corners. Whereas Jon's kind of an idiot, so yeah. So I suppose what I'm saying is that, you know, it's both me and you know, when we're writing Jon's character, kind of had it quite easy, because we sort of, I think, I'll tell you what the pitfalls would have been, making him too much like David Brent. You know, Jon shouldn't have been a cliche. He's ordinary. He's not Salieri too. He's not intentionally malevolent. He's us. He's ordinary and nice, and he goes on social media and he wants to get more followers and he wants the band to get more followers. You know, all his intentions are sort of pure, but within these pure intentions, there's this unintentional growing malevolence. So there were pitfalls with Jon, but the pitfalls were, you know, don't turn him into Salieri, don't turn him into like an idiot. You know, he's not David Brent, he's us. You know, the great trick of Frank actually is of the movie is that we're on Jon's side. You know, if Jon is David Brent from the beginning of the film, you're not on his side. He's a caricature, but actually Jon is us. You know. And yet his malevolence grows from within and ruins everything from within, just like our malevolence can grow from within and ruin everything. So that was a pitfall. You and were you aware of that?
Yeah, because we talked about it. It was the one stick in the ground that made me think, if you ever get Brentish, I'm definitely veering too close. And it was quite difficult at times, because he was in the office every day, and I was talking about the things that he does in the office. Thankfully, I started thinking about kind of rhythms of how he would tweet and patterns. So, you know, one week he did album sleeves made out of. So every day for lunch, Jon would have the same thing. He would have a cheese spread sandwich and Skittles.
Oh, that's right. And he would do competitions.
Yes, so do the competitions, which was album sleeves made out of.
Good, such a good, lovely idea.
And then a little bit later on, he decided to change his diet a little bit, so he started having hard-boiled eggs. He was bringing hard-boiled eggs, so I would, John would draw a pop star on the egg, and his followers would have to try and guess who it was. Just try to think what someone does in the office and make it entertaining.
Yeah.
It brings out all these Brentisms that you just have to go.
Yeah, no, don't do that.
I can't go there.
Yeah.
And there was some, I kind of brought some real stories into John the character's Twitter feed. I was talking to a friend of mine, and I won't name the company that he works for, but I was asking him what's it like to work there, and he's like, it's really weird. Not only did he not have tea bags, that you can use, they won't provide milk, so you have to bring in your own milk, which means that there's one guy in the office who brings food dye in, and he puts it in his milk every day.
So no one else will touch his milk.
No one else will touch his milk, which was a great story, which obviously
And is it slowly poisoning him?
Well, I don't know, but basically John countered that by bringing in his own food dye. So in the morning you'd have one that was blue, and by the end of the day you'd have 6 bottles of milk that was blue. Right. So he pulled pranks, but kind of slightly smarter pranks than the office type pranks.
And then the really smart thing that he did is like when John's social media life starts to run in parallel with the actual narrative of the movie, and John goes off to Vetno, you were posting little vines, weren't you? And so what you would see is like scenes that were in the movie, but shot from a different part of the room, as if John was actually, because in the movie John is secretly, John's like spying on the band and secretly posting stuff online, and so our John, your John was doing that.
And he would, knowing what footage I had from Vetno, he would ask anyone for requests. He would say, "Does anyone want to see anything like Vetno?" And people would tweet back saying, "Film the lake." Right. So I would then upload a clip of the lake and go, "There you go, there's the lake." And someone would say, "Go and film Frank now." So I'd have a little clip of Frank working on it. So it was that ability to have an interaction with the audience and make it feel super real with them, because a lot of them did believe I was genuinely in Ireland with a band. Right. So
that's really amazing. This wouldn't necessarily work with every movie, right?
Oh,
no. But the fact that this movie, it was perfect for this movie actually.
Well, it was perfect because John had a very, very good understanding of Twitter. In the movie. Yeah. And it kind of worked because of all the legwork that we put in beforehand. Me knowing what I could do and what I couldn't do.
Yeah, exactly. And that was you and Anna Higgs coming to New York and just sort of, working out fundamentals, like it has to all come from John. Nobody else in the band, has even heard of social media, barely heard of the internet. So it's all coming from John.
So, were there any tweets that you saw that, and it doesn't matter, were there any things that he did or any tweets that you saw that
that's not John? That's not John,
or you?
No, I'd have to be a monster to start dissecting, the sort of use of words. Also, I made mistakes with John. I don't think any of them are really in the film, but certainly in earlier drafts. So, for instance, John. My writing's always got a tendency to be a little verbose, like use slightly odd words. So here's an example. Towards the beginning of the film, John's sitting on a bench and he's eating a panini. And I wrote that John, and then he tweets. And the tweet I wrote was, cheese and ham panini, my default panini. And Lenny felt that the word default was just a little bit too, I don't know what the word is, just a bit too, just draws attention to itself a bit too much. So he changed it to cheese and ham panini, #living the dream, which I would have thought was just too banal. But Lenny had the courage to go that banal. And so, I'm not the perfect, I'm not the king of John. I've got, that's the film. Everybody's voice all goes into a bag together and you shake it up.
So, finally, to finish, did you learn anything from the process of working collaboratively on this?
I mean, I thought and still think that it was a really smart idea, and I love the idea that there's a whole sort of wonderland out there for people in years to come. You know, we'll buy the DVD of Frank, pause when I see John's Twitter handle, wonder whether there really is a John Bowes on Twitter, find it, and then spend an hour, going through the maze. And I think that's great. It's great that they put all the legwork, and it'll live on.
John, thank you very much.
Thanks, Hugh.